ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Ever since a beef Wellington was used for murder, I've been wondering, why does a mushroom have the ability to kill humans? Sure, no one wants to be eaten, but how will the message about your toxicity get out if all the witnesses are dead? And if fungi can do that, then what else can it do? Anne Jones here, investigating mushrooms. Search for What the Duck and look for mushrooms. Find it wherever you get your podcasts or on the ABC Listen app.
Could Barnaby Joyce lead Pauline Hanson's One Nation party? Well, it might be exactly what the MP has his eyes on, as talk of his defection from the Nationals intensifies. Today, Radio National Breakfast's political correspondent, Melissa Clarke, on what Barnaby is up to and why. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily. Mel, when you think of the National Party, you sort of think of Barnaby Joyce. It feels like he's been around forever.
It's like they're synonymous, that you can't really have one without the other, you know, and he's been around in federal politics for nearly 20 years now, or more than 20 years. He was first elected way back in 2004 when he held a Senate seat in Queensland.
So who is the new Senator-elect who's given John Howard parliamentary powers not seen since the Fraser years? Barnaby Joyce spoke to me from his account.
It dawned on you, I've actually got the job. Now I've got an immense responsibility in front of me, so I was thinking about that, then the phone just rang off the hook.
He held that for a couple of elections, then went to the lower house in the New South Wales seat of New England. He's been Deputy Prime Minister not once, but twice. He's certainly a larger-than-life character, so it's really hard to think of the Nationals without thinking of Barnaby Joyce.
Totally, because he's also built a reputation as somewhat of a maverick.
I think that's very fair to say. That he's the kind of person you can attach a lot of adjectives to.
Yes.
You know, he's a maverick, he's a rebel, he's a character. He's got the hat and often the red face when he's in full flight, on his feet in the floor of Parliament. Like, you know about it when Barnaby's got something to say.
But we don't want to have to deal with Clarke. No, we don't want to deal with Clarke. We hear lots of rumours around here, but we never get any questions about policy. Don't worry, you'll be next. If he fails, he'll be next. You're gone, you go back there. He comes up here, you go over there. It's all going to happen.
He's not afraid to tackle issues. He's not afraid to swim against the tide of even his own party. You know, he's made his name pushing back on key issues where he hasn't been satisfied with where his own party and the Liberal Party that he works in coalition with have been, and whether that's been the privatisation of Telstra, whether it's been the Murray-Darling Basin Plan, whether it's been merger laws. He's been willing to fight not only for a policy, but fight within his own party about policies too.
The other thing, though, of course, as we all are pretty aware of, that controversy follows him around, Mel. But no matter what he does, he seems to always survive.
And we're not talking any run-of-the-mill scandal. I mean, there have been numerous times where, for any other politician, their career might have ended. Yeah. I mean, he was one of a number of politicians who had to leave Parliament because they were constitutionally ineligible because of his citizenship. Yeah. Now, he and others came back from that. But there was also the time that he ended up having to move back to the backbench over a scandal of an affair he had with one of his staffers. It led to the infamous bonk ban by Malcolm Turnbull that many people will remember, but that didn't stop his progress.
Barnaby Joyce has launched a savage attack on his political partner, the Prime Minister.
Joyce had stewed all night on Malcolm Turnbull's takedown of his character.
He made that shocking error of judgment. This was a personal issue that's been dragged into the public arena.
More recently, we had the case of him being filmed lying down on his back in a Canberra street in a very poor state, shall we say.
I made a big mistake. There's no excuse for it.
That led to him then confirming he was having issues with combining medication and alcohol and needing to take a step back then. So to say there's been some controversy following him around would be to understate it, I think.
Yes, sure. All right. So given his history, I think it's hardly surprising, Mel, where he finds himself today, sticking it to the party that he has actually been representing for the past 20 years.
It's hardly surprising, but it's also quite extraordinary, and I feel it's in a very Barnaby way that combines the personal and the politics all at once. So he's now said he will not be contesting the next election in his seat with the Nationals, that he won't sit with his colleagues when they meet in Canberra.
Honestly, I wish people all the very best. That's what I actually do. Like most things, you feel a lot better when you're not angry. And I'm not angry now because I've said I'm getting out.
But there's also a huge amount of question marks that he's left as well. Is he formally leaving the party? Is he going somewhere else? How much of this is down to his disputes with David Littleproud, the current leader? How much of this is about policy and net zero? It's a very Barnaby story.
Yeah, sure is. Okay, so on the weekend, there was a leak to the press that he was actually in advanced talks to defect to One Nation. So what do we now know about that, and what has he said about it?
So this has been going on for a while. We know that many months ago, Barnaby Joyce and Pauline Hanson had sort of tested the waters with each other, but it didn't really go anywhere. What we know now is that Barnaby Joyce has been considering where he sits in the party. We know that some of his supporters in his local electorate have left the Nationals to join a new branch of One Nation in Tamworth. And Barnaby Joyce has said he doesn't want to rule anything out at this point, but that he did speak to Pauline Hanson over the weekend, saying that was largely because reports about him in the media talking to her, he might as well actually pick up the phone to her. But it's clear there's been a bit of discussion going on between the two.
And it's clear that he thinks that he's more aligned now with One Nation than the National Party. And that doesn't it, Mel, come down to the Nationals' commitment to reach net zero by 2050. He doesn't like that one bit.
This is where it gets really interesting. So Barnaby Joyce has been one of the leaders in the Nationals in the push against this net zero commitment, and he wants to pull away from it.
I mean, I'll tell you one, net zero. We can't. This is insane. What we are doing to our nation for absolutely no return whatsoever with the climate is certifiably insane.
But it gets a little more complicated than that, because the Nationals are in the process of backing away from net zero too. I mean, the position we've had from the leader, David Littleproud, has been that there is a formal review underway, but that their view is that net zero can't come at any cost. And that's something the Liberals leader, Susan Lee, has talked about as well. Net zero, but not at any cost. Now, we're expecting within days the Nationals to declare its position on net zero, and you can guarantee that's not going to be a blank cheque for net zero. It might still commit to some level of emissions reduction, but this not at any cost factor is there. So it's really curious that Barnaby Joyce has walked away now when the Nationals are just really days away from settling a position on this very policy issue.
So just to put that into some context, I think it's worth noting, Mel, that, of course, while Barnaby Joyce has held all these really quite high-profile positions in the Nationals, including, of course, being the leader twice, he's been sitting on the backbench, and he really doesn't like doing that.
He has complained about being, down the end of the benches in Parliament, feeling out of the mix. He's made it very clear that his relationship with David Littleproud as leader isn't working effectively. They don't really talk outside of positions where they're forced to.
I always try to be as honest as I can with these things. It's not unusual, but obviously the relationship with David was less than spectacular. I mean, I think if we say anything else, you're not being truthful.
He doesn't like being on the backbench. He really didn't like being told in the last election campaign that he wasn't to campaign outside of his electorate unless it was organised by National Party headquarters. He felt like he was being put in a box. And if there's one thing Barnaby Joyce resists, it's being put in a box. So that personal relationship is really key there. He's a man who wants to lead, he wants to have a prominent position, and he certainly doesn't have one in the Nationals as it is now.
Try to draw the analogy. It's a bit like being in any other relationship. If I said, I know we're in a relationship, but I think we should need generational change between us, you'd say, well, that's not sounding too good. And if I also said, and by the way, I don't want to be seen in public with you, you'd say, well, it doesn't sound like we're having much of a relationship here. Might be time to consider other alternatives.
And we know he is an ambitious politician, and we've seen that, of course, time and again. So there is speculation, isn't there, Mel, that in fact perhaps he sees this move or a potential move to One Nation actually furthering his political career.
That's right. This could be as much about developing a next chapter of Barnaby Joyce's career. What's being discussed is a long-term plan that could ultimately see Barnaby Joyce take over from Pauline Hanson as the leader of the party. But there's quite a few things that would need to happen for that. Now, firstly, Pauline Hanson needs to retire. Look, she's more than 70 now. She has been in the game for a very long time. A succession plan would certainly be something she would want to do, and Barnaby Joyce has the sort of national profile that One Nation needs to survive post Pauline Hanson.
The public love him. I think he's got a lot to offer politics. We're on the same page. If we want the country to move forward and we want to represent the people, then we have to work together as a team.
So what you would need to engineer this is you would need the current One Nation senator in New South Wales is Sean Bell. The machinations that are discussed is he would take a seat that's left vacant by Pauline Hanson, either at the end of her term or when she resigns in the future, and that would leave Barnaby Joyce able to take this New South Wales Senate position that would become available. And then he would become leader of the party as a New South Wales senator for One Nation. This is not something that's set in stone, but it is an idea that is being discussed.
And of course, there are some people in the Nationals that will be fighting to keep Barnaby Joyce, trying to convince him not to go.
And we're seeing that right now. I mean, we have had David Littleproud now come out and say that he wants Barnaby Joyce to stay. How much he wants that deep down in his heart, I don't know.
And we want him to stay in the National Party. I think he has a contribution to make between now and when he retires.
Michael McCormack is saying that he wants Barnaby Joyce to stay. Matt Canavan, a close ally of Barnaby Joyce over the years, has made it clear that he thinks the Nationals should do everything it can to keep him on the team. But also clearly his relationship inside the party room is broken down.
All right, so Barnaby Joyce, he says this really all does come down to the Nats supporting a net zero target by 2050. As you say, that could actually change quite soon. But just tell me, Mel, just so I understand this, what does he actually fear will happen if the opposition and the Nationals actually stuck to that target?
It is something that he sees as the National Party having moved away from its constituency in regional Australia, that it's a policy that, from his point of view, doesn't actually help with the question of climate change, and there's a consequence being paid for that by regional Australians. And he's certainly tapping into a sentiment that is very strong in parts of regional Australia where they're experiencing high power bills, where there is a rollout of infrastructure for renewable energy that raises frustrations around the impact of that on farming landscapes.
Deindustrialising Australia, forcing the poor into poverty, dividing communities, destroying your environment that apparently you're trying to protect, for no purpose whatsoever in regards to change to the climate, that's just barking mad. And, on that issue, I suppose One Nation is not barking mad.
This is something that there is strong support for, and no doubt in parts of his electorate, he's getting a very strong message that people want him and others to fight on. But like everything, it's more complicated than that. There are plenty in the regions who welcome the investment of the rollout of renewable energy in their areas for the employment opportunity it brings, for the fact that there is a transition of energy that needs to take place anyway. This is a very complicated area, and the answers that he is offering, which is scrapping net zero, isn't necessarily going to deliver what he's promising, which is lower power bills.
All right, well, Mel, it sounds like if Barnaby Joyce does defect to another party, this could actually be the rebirth of Barnaby Joyce rather than the end of his political career after the next poll.
I will never be forecasting the end of Barnaby Joyce's political career, because history tells us that it's very hard to keep the man down. Look, I think there's still a long way to go in this story before we get to the next election. We could have a couple of versions of Barnaby Joyce's future career before we head back to the polls.
Melissa Clarke is the political correspondent for Radio National Breakfast. This episode was produced by Sydney Peed and Cinnamon Nippard. Audio production by Sam Dunn. Our supervising producer is David Cody. I'm Sam Hawley. Thanks for listening.